Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a pretty bold proposal. It links America's biggest political crises to a fundamental flaw in how we're all taught to think, and, get this, it offers a radical overhaul of our education system as the solution.
Okay, let's jump right in. The source material we're looking at today argues that our biggest challenges are being fueled by this kind of binary, either or thinking. It takes these incredibly complex, nuanced issues and boils them down to a simple battle of good versus evil, us versus them. So this gets us to the heart of the problem that the source identifies, this crisis of binary thinking. And we're not just talking about political slogans here. The proposal suggests this very simplistic way of seeing the world has created deep, systemic vulnerabilities all across our society, making us really susceptible to oversimplified answers for incredibly complex problems. And one really glaring symptom of this, according to the source, a huge surge in censorship. Since 2021, we've seen over 16,000 instances of book bans in schools. That's the highest level since the McCarthy era. It's a direct result of framing ideas as either safe or dangerous, with no room in between. And you can see here just how this mindset kind of creeps into everything. When it comes to climate, it creates this false choice between total denial and reality, even with near-unanimous scientific consensus. In economics, it leads to policies that totally ignore feedback loops, like how something like rent control can accidentally create incentives for corruption. And on social issues, it just traps us in these us versus them fights that make finding real solutions pretty much impossible. So that leads to a really crucial question. Where does this simplistic thinking come from? I mean, is it just human nature? Well, the proposal we're examining makes a different argument. It's something we're actually taught. And the diagnosis it offers for what's at the heart of the problem is, well, it's pretty surprising and honestly, a little unsettling. The argument is that our entire education system is built on a foundation of linear cause and effect thinking. We teach that A leads to B, which leads to C. The problem is this makes students cognitively vulnerable to simplistic explanations later in life because they just haven't been given the tools to understand real-world complexity. And this is where the stakes get really, really high. The source makes this powerful connection. When we're trained to look for simple answers to complex problems, we become way more susceptible to authoritarian appeals that promise exactly that: easy fixes. The research points to states like Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Ohio, suggesting that places with significant educational restrictions, these so-called educational gag orders, also tend to show more signs of democratic backsliding. The source argues these two things are deeply connected. Okay, so if linear thinking is the problem, the proposal argues that systems thinking is the solution. So let's explore what that actually means and how it could build a whole new foundation for learning and, just maybe, for democracy itself. This really shows the core contrast perfectly. We'd be moving from a simple, one-way street of logic to understanding a complex, interconnected web of relationships. It's about seeing all the feedback loops, the nonlinear effects, and how the whole is often way greater and more unpredictable than just the sum of its parts. The framework gets even more ambitious, proposing this idea called quantum pedagogy. Now, don't get hung up on the name. The core concept is all about teaching students to be comfortable with ambiguity. So instead of searching for that one right answer right away, they're encouraged to hold multiple, even contradictory interpretations at the same time. It's only through discussion and really weighing the evidence that the class works together to find a more robust, nuanced understanding. And this whole educational philosophy is grounded in thinkers like Einstein. He famously argued that imagination and the ability to see things from different frames of reference were actually more important than rigid, abstract logic. It's about creativity, not just calculation. And this isn't just some abstract theory either. The initiative outlines a really concrete K-12 curriculum that's designed to build these skills right from the very beginning. It's designed to be developmental, so it grows with the students. It kicks off in kindergarten with simple pattern recognition. Then in elementary school, it moves to understanding that events can have multiple causes. By middle school, students are working with abstract systems. And by the time they're in high school, they're mastering the analysis of complex, real-world problems. The whole goal is to build these 4 core capacities. Students learn to see circular causality and feedback loops, and to recognize emergence, how complex patterns can arise from simple rules. And crucially, they develop something called paradox tolerance, the ability to hold 2 opposing ideas in their mind at the same time. Like understanding that technology can be incredibly freeing and deeply isolating,
and that both of those things can be true at once.
So this all leads us back to the central question. How does teaching kids to think differently actually help solve our democratic crisis? Well, the source material argues this kind of thinking isn't just for the classroom, it's for governance itself. There's a related proposal called Constitution Reimagined, and it suggests using this exact same nonlinear, systems-based approach to analyze and ultimately strengthen American democracy. It introduces this really powerful concept called the synthesis engine. Now, think of it less like a literal engine and more like a sophisticated simulator for democracy. Its goal isn't to find the one right answer to a policy debate, but to map out all the consequences and all the trade-offs between our founding principles, like liberty versus security, so we can navigate them more intelligently. And the engine works through this fascinating process that the source calls Pareto wave collapse. Okay, that's a mouthful, so let's break it down. The wave part is about exploring all the best possible compromises. Imagine a map of every single scenario where you can't improve one value, like, say, economic freedom, without slightly reducing another, like economic equality. The collapse is just the democratic process itself. Through debate, elections, legislation, society chooses to land on one of those balanced solutions, at least for a while. And this table shows exactly what that looks like in practice. The source material reframes the Constitution's principles not as these simple static rules, but as a set of competing objectives that are in a permanent state of tension. You have individual liberty versus public order, federal authority versus states' rights. The source is arguing that these aren't problems to be solved, but fundamental tensions to be managed constantly. So ultimately, these proposals leave us with a really provocative thought. The conflicts we see playing out today, they aren't new. They are baked into the very DNA of the American system from the very beginning. So maybe, the only way forward isn't to find a final single answer, but to just get much, much better at living with the questions.